all four of you, if you could make your way here to the podium and get your mics on, that would be great. So today we'll unpack what is HH. Yeah, please come on up all together. Thank you. We're going to talk about what is HH, but we're also going to talk about what are some of the maybe untold stories. Is there an impact to education? Is there an impact to renters? Is there an impact to employers? And what about local governments? We've been hearing a lot about the impact to property owners. So that's the discussion that we hope to have today. I am going to briefly introduce our four panelists, and then I'm going to join them here on the stage, and we'll have this conversation. Please just raise your hand as I introduce you for those who don't know you. Chris Brown, I think, is very well known to many of you in the audience, longtime Vice President of Policy and Research for Common Sense Institute and the co-author of our HH analysis, The Taxpayer Dilemma. Thank you, Chris. Lang Sias is the 2023 Mike A. Loprino Free Enterprise Fellow. Lang is the author of The Taxpayer Dilemma, HH analysis, as well as two other reports issued this year on the state of competitiveness here in Colorado. Before joining our team of fellows, he was a state legislator, and he always got things done working across the political aisle. So thank you, Lang, for your continued leadership. We are also joined by Brenda Dickoner, who's the president and CEO of Ready Colorado. They are an education advocacy organization. Brenda is a tremendous leader in leading this organization. She used to work at the Colorado Department of Education as an expert in school accountability, ensuring low-income students had access to the best schools possible in Colorado. And she is a former education fellow at Common Sense Institute. Last but not least, I want to introduce Toby Domish, the assessor of Douglas County. And when HH first passed in the last few days of legislative session, I think the last 3 days of legislative session, when we were all looking in the internet trying to figure out what in the world this thing was, I think I stumbled upon one of Toby's PowerPoints, and I was so grateful for his expertise and his ability to unpack a hugely complicated issue. So I'm thrilled that he could join us today. Can you guys give them a round of applause as I make my way over? All right, everybody mic'd up, ready to go. Hello. Okay, so who am I going to put in the hot seat first? I think Chris Brown. So I'm going to ask Chris. Oh, sure. Can we do a quick mic check? Let's make sure everyone can hear you all.
Hello? Oh, I'm working.
Hello.
Okay.
Good morning.
It worked. All right.
Good morning.
Great, good idea, Chris. So before we launch into the panel, Chris, can you just give a quick 2-minute overview of what is Proposition HH, and why did you and Lang call it the taxpayer dilemma? Is it really a dilemma?
Great question. We had fun with the title, but we had other ones too, but that was the one you allowed through. No, so the taxpayer dilemma and Proposition HH. I mean, I think you showed one of the key slides there that property owners across the board, residential, commercial, other non-residential property owners face significant tax increases next year as a result of property values going up. And Proposition HH offers limited property tax relief, but it comes with pretty significant strings attached, is the way I think I would look at it. Our analysis shows that over the first decade, the Proposition HH would reduce property taxes by about $9.9 billion, but it asks voters to increase the state spending limit, increasing the Tabor spending limit by adding an additional 1% annual compounding expansion of the state spending limit, which would increase state taxes by $9.9 billion over the first decade. So the average homeowner would see about a $4,700, $4,600 reduction in their property taxes and pay and see about a $5,119 reduction in their future Tabor refunds, thereby increasing their state taxes. So that's sort of the first dilemma, I think, that property owners and Coloradans face. The second is, if HH is not extended past 2032, which is the immediate time limit of the measure, there would be about a 1.3 billion tax increase immediately in 2032 as a result of reverting back to prior rates, and there would be about $2.2 billion less going to schools that the legislature would have been spending and would have to make up for by some other measures in the general fund. So the likelihood that this gets extended beyond 2032, I think, is significant. And so the dilemma for taxpayers is providing the legislature with authority to continue the provisions of HH beyond 2032, in which case the potential tax increase grows to about $42 billion by 2040, and the property tax relief is about $20 billion. So a lot of numbers, a lot to kind of digest, but I think there's several provisions in here that are concerning and I think raise a lot of questions for voters. We can get into some of these other questions and issues later.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Toby, I'm going to turn to you as the assessor. Isn't it nice to have an assessor with you? I just feel like I have a lot of questions for you. But let's just start with this. How did we even get here? Why are property taxes spiking so drastically?
Sure. Well, I don't think we could talk about HH. Hear me? Mic on? Good. Okay. I don't think we can talk about HH without talking about the real estate market in Gallagher, because that's where it all starts. I'm sure everyone in the room is aware that at the state of Colorado, we all repealed Gallagher in 2020. Everyone remember that decision? That decision's coming home to roost, so to speak. That repeal in 2020 really released the residential assessment rate. Gallagher required the residential assessment rate to decrease. Over the course of 38 years, we as homeowners in Colorado benefited from a lower residential assessment rate as our values increased over that time. And that stopped in 2020. That repeal put the hands of the residential assessment rate in the General Assembly. And so now they get to determine that. And what's interesting and difficult to accept is right at that same time, the residential real estate market during COVID, as you all know, was really exploding. We experienced an increase in the residential real estate market across Colorado in that 2-year period in which the property tax study period applies, increase as high as any other 2-year period in our state's history. And so the appraisal date for the 2023 reassessment is June of 2022. And when you look across Colorado, we had increases 20, 30, 40, up to 110% on average for counties throughout. One of the interesting things about the real estate market is it affected every part of the state. And that was really the first time that's ever happened. Colorado's got an interesting real estate market in that if you compare the mountain counties, the western slope, to the Front Range, the eastern plains, they always move at different pace because we might have something going on in the oil markets, or we might have something going on in the resort markets different than the Front Range. But in this reappraisal, it was across the board. And so this problem is across the board. The result of that was assessors performing their reappraisal based on that appraisal date resulted in increases that were, for most Coloradans, above 25%. In Douglas County in particular, 95% of our residential properties increased between 30 and 60%, and the average was 48. And I think we can all in the room agree that a property tax system should not result in 40+ increases in 1 year. Can we all at least agree with that? And so something had to be done, and I'll just finish by saying it looks like Prop HH is somebody's answer to that.
We brought the right assessor. Thank you, Toby. You really are good at breaking down complex issues. Lang, I want to bring you into the mix because we've been talking a lot about homeowners. And you may have seen in our report and on that slide, when we talk about our 3 big takeaways, we say renters are the biggest losers. That seems harsh. Help me understand, Lang, what do we mean by that? And what did your report mean by that?
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, let's understand that about a third of Colorado homeowners, which is, or households, excuse me, which is about 768,000 households, are renters. And so in this situation, renters, and I think anybody in here who has been either a renter or a landlord knows that when taxes go up, rents tend to go up, and they tend to be stickier on the way down than they are on the way up. So the property tax increases get passed along to our renters in the form of higher rents, and the renters, of course, don't enjoy any appreciation in the value of the underlying asset. And at the same time, those renters get to contribute their share of those Tabor refunds that the state will then retain under this. So they are in a different position than the homeowner, who at least sees the benefit of some appreciation. And this issue can get a little bit more complex when you look at different ways that Tabor refunds can be distributed. Happy to talk about that in response to a question. But the bottom line for us is that renters absolutely pay a higher price as a group than folks who own their homes.
Thanks, Lang. I see a lot of education leaders in the room, and Brenda, I think the next question is for you. You know, sometimes I wonder, is HH actually an education measure, or is it not? And I'm curious to get your general thoughts on this measure in terms of education.
Yeah, thanks, Kelly. Whoa, sorry, everybody. Thanks, Kelly. The simple answer is yes, it's an education measure, but I think we all know that Prop HH is not simple. So I'll give a little bit of an overview of why it's complicated. Amendment 23 was passed in 2000, and it requires that spending on education increase each year by inflation. Now, the legislature hasn't necessarily fully complied with that yet, but they're promising to starting next year. And so education funding, sorry, all due respect to legislators, and Rep. Hartzig back there is laughing. Education funding will be increasing regardless, or should be, per constitutional amendment. This will dedicate revenue towards the state education fund. Any of that excess revenue that is retained, aka your Tabor refunds, is supposed to go to the state education fund. Now, that could simply go to that Amendment 23 required increase each year. So if you hear anyone promising that there's going to be extra revenue, new revenue going to schools from Prop HH, I would say take that with a grain of salt, because really, again, education funding should be increasing every year by inflation anyways. And so in effect, what this could be is just a general tax increase, because the legislature would then have general funds freed up that would otherwise be going to this constitutionally required education funding increase. And instead now they'll have general funds freed up for whatever pet projects or priorities they desire to spend on.
Very interesting, Brenda. Thank you. That helps me better understand it in terms of education. I know we're going to go back to education, but I want to bring you, Toby, back in, because again, we're trying to talk about some of the hidden impacts, which you might not be seeing in the headlines. We talked about renters, talked about education. Toby, when this measure was being debated at the Capitol those last 2 or 3 days, I kept hearing, oh, this will be great for local governments. They need to have a backfill addressed. And I just want to hear from a local government leader, help me understand, how would local governments be impacted if HH passes?
Yeah, we could talk for 30 minutes about this question, but we don't have that time, do we? But I'll start with this. The backfill concept is interesting just at a high level, because assessments across the state are going up 20, 30, 40, 50, 60%, et cetera. What brings on the need for the backfill if assessments are going up in the first place? So just the prime question underneath that sort of raises a lot of questions. In Douglas County, the conversation